Python practice problems, video number 2, getting input and basic string manipulation. I'm Stephen Marcus and I'm doing a series of Python practice videos. There's a link in the description to my short introduction video that tells who I am and how these videos are being done and what to expect. Also in the description is a link to this Jupyter Notebook without the answers so that you can go through it on your own, either before you watch the video or with me as I do the problems. Furthermore, in the description are a list of links to use as a starting point for your search on how to complete each problem. To use this video, I'm assuming that you have either gone through my first video or have a solid grasp on the Python print command. Also, I'll be using Python 3. That's significant in this video especially because Python 3 uses the input function which replaced the older raw input function. If you're ready, let's get started. Problem number 1. Request input from the user. What is your name? Store the response in a variable called name and print hello name. Okay, name is my variable. I'm going to use input. What is your name? Question mark. I want to use the type command, which tells us what type a variable is. So if I put something in there, it tells me that my output is a string, and that's something we want to notice. Anytime you use input, it's going to put out a string. So if you need something other than a string, you're going to have to cast it and change it into whatever you want. I'm going to comment that out and use the print command. Hello space plus name. Since name is a string, print's okay with printing a specified string and then a variable that's a string. Run it again. Stephen, hello Stephen. So that's pretty straightforward. Let's move on to problem number 2. Request input from the user. Enter a number. Add 1 to the number and then print your number is 1 plus that number. So num equals input. Enter a number. Okay, so we know input is going to spit out a string, so that's a problem. So I'm going to have to cast that, and I'm going to cast it as an integer just because it's easy to deal with. So now my input command is going to spit out a string, and then it's going to be cast using this int into num. And I can say num2 equals num plus 1 print your number plus 1 is space. Now we have a problem with print because print can only handle strings. So we're going to have to convert this back using the string cast into num2. Let's see if this works. Enter a number 5. Your number plus 1 is 6. So that works, but it's a little clunky. We don't have to go through all this. Why don't we say num plus 1 and do it right there on the in the print command. That'll save us one variable. Let's try it again. 88. Your number plus 1 is 89. So that works. Okay, let's look at number 3. Prompt the user to enter a temperature in Fahrenheit, print out the temperature in Celsius. Classic problem. If you've not done it yet, go ahead and try it now. Okay, here's our solution. Let's do input, enter the hardest part's spelling it, Fahrenheit. Now there's my input. Let's assign it to a variable called far. That's going to be a string that it's putting out. What I want is a float, so I'll have a floating point number that can hold a decimal. My Celsius, I'm going to say Celsius equals, and you can look up the math on this, Fahrenheit minus 32 times 5/9. There's our formula. So now I need to say print, and the first thing is going to be, I can put in string Celsius plus degrees Celsius. Let's see if this works. If I put in 212 in Fahrenheit, it should be 100 in Celsius. And if I say 32, it should give me 0, and that does good. And now let's try 72. 72's in there. That spit out an irrational number because we're doing division. And that's kind of goofy, so let's see if we can fix this. Let's pull out that and let's format it. So I'm going to say boom dot 2f dot format cell degrees Celsius. And let's see if this is right. If I put in a 72, I get 22.22 degrees Celsius. Okay, so you can look this up on how to format decimal numbers in Python. And honestly, you might want to scribble that down in your notes someplace because that's going to be very handy. That is your formula for limiting to 2 decimal places. If you put a comma in right there, it'll even throw a comma in every 3 numbers the way we like to do in English. So that's worth having. Okay, let's move on to number 4. Prompt the user for a string with enter something interesting and print hello. The trick to this was putting the quotes in your input string. Go ahead and try this if you haven't done so yet. Okay, input enter something interesting, and interesting is in quotes. Now, Jupyter Notebooks is pretty good about cluing us in on stuff, and you can see this is black. All you have to do is go in and it's called escaping. Escape those out with a backslash. So now let's actually put this in something. Name equals, that's going to put out a string, and I'm happy with that. Print hello space and name. And there's my prompt. Enter something interesting. So my parentheses, my quotes went in. Fred. Hello, Fred. All right. Let's take a look at number 5. Prompt the user for a name and number, then print the name and the number of times entered. This is kind of a neat trick that Python lets you do, and it can help a lot in formatting sometimes. If you've not tried it yet, go ahead and try it and come back. Input, enter name, and let's save that as name. It's a string, and we're good with that. Number, input, number. Now this is going to have to be cast. It needs to be an integer. And now I can say print name times number. And let's see what it does. Stephen 7. So that worked, but it's kind of hard to read. Let's see if we can do a little bit better with it. So I'm going to say name plus a space. And to do that, I'm going to need to put it in parentheses. And I might even throw a space or 2 in there just to make it a little bit more readable. Enter name Fred, number of times 8. There we go. So that's kind of neat. Let's move on to number 6. Set a variable named minutes equal to the number 45. Prompt the user for a string. In the prompt, use minutes, and then print out the string. The trick with this one is you're actually using a variable in the prompt for an input. Again, if you've not tried it, go ahead and try it and come back. Let's start off with input, enter a show that you would watch for, and I've got to set my variable first. So minutes equals 45 for, and that's going to have to be cast as a string that you would watch for that number of minutes. I'm not putting it in anything. Let's say show, and show is going to be a string. Print show. That's already a string, so I can just do that. Must be a good show. a pretty good show. There we go. Okay, number 7, we're to the challenging ones now. Prompt the user for hourly rate and for number of hours worked, subtract 30% for taxes, then calculate the total paycheck, tax amount, and final paycheck, print it out. What we're looking for is this. It's basically just a math problem. If you haven't tried this yet, pause the video and give it a shot and then come back. Alright, let's jump in. The first thing we're going to do is the hourly rate. So input, enter hourly rate. That is going to put out a string. Don't want a string, I want a float so that we can put in a number with a decimal. And let's store that. The first one is going to be rate. Similarly, the hours worked is going to be a float. Input, enter number of hours. So there's our two pieces of information. Getting the total is easy enough. We can say total rate times hours. Print you earned plus, okay, total is going to be, rate's a float, hours is a float, total is going to be a float. So string total. Let's see if it's working so far. I like to write just a little bit of code and check it to make sure I don't have errors. 10 and 8 gives me 80. Okay, my code makes sense. Plus, and were taxed what? We know it's going to be a float, so I'm going to have to cast it as a string. The total times 0.3. Let's try this. 10, 8, that looks reasonable. Plus, and I'm going to put in a return here, and your final pay amount is plus string is going to be the total minus, that's basically this, the total times 0.3. And let's see if our math all works. Enter my hourly rate, 10, 8. That looks like it makes sense. Let's check it against what I've got in here. 10.5 and 9. That works, but I've got an irrational number in here that's going to make it look all goofy. So let's see if we can't make this thing look a little bit more pretty. I've also left out my dollar signs, so it'd be nice to have that in, and that, and that. And in the earlier problem, remember I told you to copy something down that you'd need it again. Here's the time. Curly braces, colon, dot, to float, dot, format, total. Now the good thing about that is that does the string conversion for us. And there's one, and I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it right here, and it's total times 0.3. This brings something else to light. I've got 0.3 here and 0.3 here. Now to try to teach a little bit better practice, if you're going to use the same value in a couple of different places and they're tied together like this, this is called hard coding, and it's not good practice. So I'm just going to say tax equals 0.3 and replace it with that. So later on, if I ever want to change what my tax rate is, I change it here and I don't have to go digging through all of my code and try to find where all I've referenced this. Much better idea. Control C, Control V, tax, okay, total minus total times tax. 10.5, 9, and that looks a lot better. They even got my dollar signs in there. Okay, on to number 8. Prompt the user for string input. Print out the string in all caps, then print out the string in all lowercase, and finally print out the number of characters in the string. This is a basic string problem. If you haven't tried it yet, pause the video and come back. Here we go. ST is going to be my string. So I'm going to say input, enter a string. And that's all the input I need. So if I want to convert everything into uppercase, print it out in all caps, I can say st upper is going to be my string variable. St upper. Let's go ahead and start my print statement here. The way I've got the problem worded, I don't even have any text around it. I'm just saying print it out. So let's give it a shot. Fred, and it's all uppercase. So that looks pretty easy. We can do pretty much the same thing. St lower equals st lower. Print st lower. And here's a neat trick. I'm just going to cut and paste that. That gives me all uppers and all lowers. So we're 2/3 of the way there. Finally, I'm going to say count equals st.count, and you have to tell it what you're going to count. And that says count all my characters. Print count. So if I run it again and I put in my test string, all upper, all lower, and 15. Okay, here's where we drive into the mud. These are three four-letter words, so that should be 12 characters. I have 15. Where are the extra 3 coming from? Well, one of them is the new line that's at the end of this, and the other 2 are the spaces in between. If we want to prove that to ourselves, I'll put it in there twice. So 6 times 4 should be 24. Yeah. So if you count up all of your extra spaces and the new line, that would give you 30. So to get rid of that new line, I'm just going to say -1, and that'll take out the new line. That gives us 14. So that is the 12 plus the 2 spaces. So how can we get rid of the spaces? Well, I'm going to come up here to my count, subtract out st count, and just specify my spaces. That way, no matter how many spaces that I have in there, it's going to take them out for me. And that should give me 4 times 3 is 12. Yes. 16. All right. That was number 8. Problem number 9. Prompt the user for an amount of money, enter a price. Prompt the user for a float, enter a quantity. These are both going to be floats, and you're going to multiply them together and then provide discounts for 5 different levels of discount. This is honestly not a hard problem mathematically. Where it gets a little bit more difficult is in the formatting, to where we can get all of this on one line and it looks like it makes sense. So given that, if you haven't tried this yet, pause the video, try the problem, and then come back. Okay, prompt the user for an amount of money. Input, enter a price, and said I want this to be a float. I'm going to cast it as a float, and let's call it price. And quantity is going to be just like it. Input, enter a quantity. All of these different amounts are going to work off of a total, so it's worthwhile to just go ahead and say total equals quantity times price. So printing these out, I can say print 10% plus, This is going to be a dollar amount, so we already know that it's going to be, we'll just go ahead and get ahead of the game here and put this in the format that we need. So what are we doing? We're saying total times 0.1. Now let's see if this does what we want. Enter a price, 10, 10, 10%, and that's pretty easy. Okay, so we could do the same thing for the next one's 15%. That works. The first problem that we see is it's putting them each on its own separate line, and we wanted them all on one line. And if you looked at problem number 8, we just talked about writing code that is easier to edit and hard coding, and what a dumb thing that was to do. So let's see if we can fix both of those problems. It's going to be worthwhile just to go ahead and say discount rate 1 equals 0.1, discount 2 equals 15, discount 3 equals 20, discount 4 25, cool, 30%. Okay, I want to make this 10%. So let's say string of D1, and I don't want it to be 0.1, I want it to be that. So let's run that and just see what it looks like. Okay, so that gave me, it's kind of hard to see. One, I'd like to have a colon in between them, and it gave me 10.0 because it's a floating point. I'm going to cast this as an integer, and that's going to keep me from saying something had a 7.5%, but I'm going to just go ahead and say that that's going to be rare enough that I'm not going to want it. Boop, 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 boom. What am I missing? Strint. Yes, you actually have to use parentheses. There we go. So now 10, let's get my percent sign in there. This is the majority of this problem, is just getting your formatting right. So there, 10% equals $10. And actually, didn't we want dollars in there too? There we go, nice and pretty. The next thing, I'll just go ahead and get rid of that. And we wanted it all in one line, so what we can do is use the end equals, and instead of, it normally puts in a new line, but I'm going to replace that, this comma end equals T, that's going to give me a tab instead of a new line. And I am just going to cut and paste this. And instead of that, I'm going to use D2, and instead of this, I'm going to use D1. I've got to use D2 here as well. So now if I ever want to change these rates, if I change this to 90%, I'm not going to have to go digging through all my code to see what I've done. Run it again, 10, 10. There we go. That's starting to look like something. So now I can just cut and paste these, 3 and 4 and 3 and 4, and I need one more of them. Five, 10, 10, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. And that actually looks, it looks better than what I could do it in Markdown. Let's run it again. And my example was 15 and 7. I don't have any irrational numbers, and it's something you can actually read and look at, and it looks like the math's correct too. So yeah, that was a little bit of a song and dance getting exactly what we wanted in formatting, but then once we have it there, it's something that can be edited later. Okay, let's jump on to number 10. 10's another string one. Prompt the user for a string. Replace all occurrences of the word Fred with the word Barney. Print out the new string and the number of Z's, capital and lowercase, in the string. Okay, if you've not tried this yet, pause the video and come back. ST is going to be my very creative string variable name. Input, enter a string, and that's going to put out a string, so that's what I want. That's pretty straightforward. Replace occurrences the word Fred with Barney, and I'm going to create another badly named string variable called st2. st.replace is what we're looking for, and I'm going to replace Fred with Barney, and I'm going to print st2. st2 is a string, so all I have to do is feed it to the print. That's pretty slick looking code. Enter a string, and I am going to cut and paste this. Fred and Buzz from Zanzibar, and it has replaced Fred and with Barney. We could go through the song and dance. This is going to be very case sensitive. If we expected something different, we could monkey with this. The next thing is we want to count the Z's. So count equals st dot count, and I'm going to count the Z's. How many Z's are there in my little piece of text here? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. If I do this, it's going to return 3 because there are 3 small ones and 1 large one. So I'm going to need to do plus st count and get the big ones. And that looks like it makes sense. Print there are plus, cast it as a string, count Z's in the string. Let's see if that did what we wanted. Cut and paste that. There are 4 Z's in the string, and that's our answer. Now what I wanted to do, just for the sake of showing that there are different ways to do this, I'm going to create st3 equals st dot upper, and then we could use the same st count equals st3 count Z's. So what I've done is I have taken my original text, made it all uppercase, and then all I have to count is the uppercase Z's. And let's try that and see if that returns 4. That does the same thing. It's a little bit longer. I mainly wanted to just show you that there are different ways to do it. Okay, that's number 10. Problem number 11 is another string problem. Conjunctions are and, but, and or. Prompt the user for an input string and count the occurrences of and, but, or in the input string, regardless of case, and print the result. If you've not tried this yet, pause the video and try it and come back. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to ask for the string. So st equals input, enter a string. Okay, regardless of case, so it's going to be the easiest thing to do another variable, string2, and st, create an upper. So now st is the string with all of the letters uppercase. So now we can count, we can say st count, let's catch it there, st2 count. Now we can look for and know that it's going to be all uppercase, plus st2 dot count but, or, and simply print count. enter a string, and I'm going to cut and paste this thing. And it gives me an 8. Before I get too far away, I did print and gave it it's an integer, but since it's the only thing the print command, it worked. 8. So it got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. If that's what you wanted, that would have worked. But in my example here, I've returned a 3. So I've just picked out just the complete word and but, and or. And to get that, you just have to specify spaces before and after. And we'll run it again, paste it, and that gives us the 3 that we want. All right, final problem, number 12. Prompt the user for an amount of money, that'll be a float. Enter an amount. Print the number of quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies that represent that amount. If you've not tried this yet, pause the video, give it a shot, and come back. All right. Amount equals input enter an amount, and that is going to return a string, so we got to say float. Okay, the first thing that I want to do is to get rid of that decimal place, so I'm going to say amount equals amount times 100, and that has me dealing with just pennies. Okay, the first thing to do is figure out quarters. To get quarters, I'm going to say amount divided by 25. And if I do this, I could wind up with a float, so I'm going to cast that as an integer. And I've already got it in parentheses, so I can just do that. Now, when we cast something to an integer like this, it's going to be a floor division. It's going to truncate it. So if this wound up being 4.99, it's not going to round it up to 5. It's going to give you a 4 because it's just going to truncate that 99. And that's actually what I want. I've got a new variable here called leftover that is going to be my amount with a modulus of 25, and that's going to give me my remainder, or how much is left over after I've divided by 25. So now I can begin the process of print quarters plus cast to a string quarters. Let's see if this works. 0.5 should be 2 quarters. 0.99 should be 3 quarters. That makes sense. Okay, let's move on. Dimes equals, again, my integer division. I can't use amount anymore. Amount's not going to change. That's going to be the original. Now I'm working with what's left over. So I'm going to say leftover divided by 10, and then recalculate what my leftover is, and it's going to be leftover modulus 10. Okay, let's move forward. Plus space dimes colon plus cast it as a string dimes. Okay, let's run that. 0.99. That should be 3 quarters, 2 dimes. That sounds about right. And I can even run my 4.43 through it. 17 and 1 dime. So, okay, we're on the right track, I think. Nickels equals, cast in an integer, leftover divided by 5. Recalculate leftover equals leftover modulus 5. This last leftover that I calculated after my nickels, it actually is going to represent the pennies. So if I wanted to, I could say leftover or pennies equals leftover, but we'll just know that that's what it is. nickels plus string nickels pennies left over. Let's see if it works. 443 was 17, 1, 1, and 3. 17, 1, 1, and 3. The only thing I don't like is it gave me that as a float. So I'm just going to cast that as an integer. Force the issue. 443. If I put in 17 cents, 0 quarters, 1 dime, 1 nickel, 2 pennies, and that looks like it. That's our number 12. If you feel that you've gotten anything from this video, please hit the like button. This video is one of the first of my Python practice problem videos, so I'm anxious to see if there's enough interest to continue creating them. If you'd like to be notified when I create new Python videos, please hit subscribe. If there is enough interest, I would like to create more videos that go beyond just the basics. I'd like to eventually do problems that are more like you would find in a real-world environment. I'd also like to consider branching out into other languages such as R or C++. Thanks for watching.